G'day, I'm Dave with Chaosium. In this interview, James sat down with Lynne Hardy to talk about Rivers of London, an upcoming RPG. If you enjoyed this content, let us know in the comments and subscribe to see more.
Getting the Rivers of London role-playing game actually ready to go out into its second round of external playtesting. So fingers crossed that should be going out sometime later today.
What's it been like working on it, putting it together, and bringing it out?
It's been really interesting. I mean, obviously, Paul Fricker is our core designer, and myself and Mike Mason have been throwing ideas and things in and discussing things and sort of like brainstorming to get to this point. Now, I've worked with Paul before on Masks of Nyarlathotep, but this has been a very different relationship. Obviously, because we're working much more closely together to actually refine what we want, what does and doesn't work, what supports the setting and the tone. So it's been a really interesting experience and process to get it to somewhere where it's ready to go out for the second round of play testing. We had a few ideas in the beginning. Um, we tested those. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. We threw the ones that didn't work out. We started again. We did an external round of play testing, got feedback on that. Again, looked at what worked and what didn't, tinkered around with it, and then got to this point. Obviously, we've been liaising closely with Ben to make sure that we're getting the nitty-gritty details right. Ben's also written a few little bits and bobs for us and the book, just so that he can help define the tone and set expectations and things like that. So it's been a really interesting process, actually.
Did you know about the Rivers of London RPG before you came on to write for it? Sorry, a Rivers of London series before you came on to write for it as an RPG? Or was your first introduction to it when you started making it as a game?
Oh no, it's all my fault. It is a game. I started reading the novels a few years ago. Now, I remember hearing about them a long time back, but I just never got round to reading them because I'd kind of fallen out of love with fantasy books because they were all very much of a muchness. But someone kept recommending Rivers of London to me, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And I read the first one, which I know is called Midnight Riot in America, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I binge read all of the ones that were then available and started getting them as they were coming out. I was also picking up the graphic novels as well. And then I always seem to manage to miss Ben when he was in the Northeast on book signings. Just complete accident. I was always somewhere else when he was here. So thankfully, finally, when I think it was when Lie Sleeping came out, I was actually in the same place as Ben when he was doing a book signing at Waterstones in Newcastle. So I turned up bright and early. Thankfully, it was on the same day as my hieroglyphics class, so I was there with everything ready to go. And I got in, I got to the front of the queue, we waited patiently. Um, and I was at that point, um, I was effectively full time for Chaosium, but I wasn't a permanent member of staff at that point. So I didn't have any official business cards. I just had my own little ones. So I'm at the front of the queue. I went to get the book signed. I'd already had the conversation with Mike before I went, and Mike had gone, this make a good game? So yeah, of course it would. I've already pitched it to one company who weren't interested years ago. So I get to the front of the queue with my book, and then casually just say to Ben, "You ever thought of turning this into a role-playing game?" And his face lit up because he's always wanted a role-playing game of his own. And he always thought that it would probably be Call of Cthulhu BRP based. So it was just one of those really weird serendipitous moments in history, and then of course that led to talks to get the rights and everything, all the legally stuff sorted out. And then we made the announcement, what, about 15, 16 or so months ago at Dragon Meet.
So I've asked Paul the same question, but for people who don't know about Rivers of London, how would you sell it to them? Cthulhu is cosmic horror. RuneQuest is Bronze Age fantasy. What is Rivers of London?
It's a really beautiful melting pot of ideas from all over, in the same way that London is a melting pot of ideas from all over. So I think it's a very good reflection of London in terms of the history, the peoples that have been involved in its creation and that history, and the people who are there today, weaving in elements of British folklore, other folklore, and Ben's completely insane imagination.